This is Alabama Politics with Steve Flowers, an in-depth interview with Alabama's top political newsmakers. Now, from the studios of Troy University, here is Steve Flowers.
I'm Steve Flowers, and welcome to Alabama Politics. We're glad tonight to have as our guest Ray Bryan, an attorney from Anniston, who is also a candidate for state auditor in Alabama. Ray, good to have you with us.
Thank you, Steve.
He traveled down from Calhoun, Cleburne County to be with us, brought his pretty wife and his campaign manager, and running for a somewhat obscure job in Alabama politics. It's the incumbent Samantha Shaw cannot run for re-election, y'all. She served 2 years. As a prohibition in Alabama, you can only serve 2 successive terms in the constitutional offices. And the state auditor's job has been kind of on the radar screen, and she hadn't helped it. She's been the quietest auditor I've ever seen. A lot of people use those offices, Ray, to run for higher office, and they want to get some publicity. They'll make a statement and get some publicity. They count the right number of chairs or whatever they want to use as a platform, and then they'll try to run for something higher. But she hadn't done that. She's done her job, I guess, and stayed real quiet. But it is a low-profile job. Y'all, Ray is a practicing lawyer and a successful lawyer, successful businessman up in Calhoun County, and he's running for on an unusual platform. Folks, Ray Bryan is running for state auditor to abolish the position of state auditor. Tell our viewers, Ray, something about that if you would. We're glad to have you on the show.
Well, thank you, Steve. I'm glad to be here. It's a pleasure to be able to be on a program like this, the reputation you have, and be able to have the opportunity to speak to your viewers. I know there are a lot of them out there.
Thank you.
And what you've just said is something that needs to be explained. When someone hears that originally, they think, what are you talking about? And I think that there's something that we can do here today. Like most people, I'm concerned about the direction our country is taking and our state. And I believe that today, if we don't begin to start making bold moves, being courageous at looking at things and the processes that we have in order to make them more efficient and to save money now, we're going to go over the cliff. And so what I've done is I've looked at this office, and I had some folks come to me and they said, Ray, why don't you consider running for the state auditor's position? Samantha Shaw is ending her last term. It's an open seat, and they thought I might be a good person to run for the office. And so I said, well, fine, yeah, I will. And so I started looking like but probably most people, what is the state auditor do, And so as I began to examine it and look at it more closely, I started seeing that, really what I would have thought of, I have a business background, and, being an attorney the last 25 years, I do litigation. I'm involved representing businesses, and I'm familiar with what the audit process is. And in my mind, and probably in most people's mind, is that an audit involves a financial audit of the books, and you do that, and you send your folks out into the plant to count the inventory, and they come back in with the inventory count. They give it to the accountants. There's a value assigned to it, and the financial reports are put together, and then the executives of the company make the decisions about what should be done regarding the company and the future direction it should take. In our case, to look at the state auditor's office, that isn't what is happening in reality. The state auditor originally was intended to do something of that nature in 1885, and it's interesting to go back and look at the history of it, but when the first Constitution came out, and the auditor was responsible for the financial auditing of the books and making sure that the accounts were correct. But over time, back in 1947, it changed dramatically, and the Examiners of Public Accounts was created, and by the legislature. Mm-hmm. And there's a joint legislative committee that oversees.
I serve on that committee.
You do.
in the legislature. So
Well,
I oversaw that. I knew it was an honor to be on that committee.
That's
It had some power to
a
it.
very powerful committee and very important committee, because that examiner is the chief examiner who you appointed would be the one overseeing the financial audits of the book.
So you're convinced that there's a duplication of effort?
Yes, sir.
That the examiner of public accounts does what the auditor was intended to do at the origination of the Constitution.
We're one of 8 states in the country that has
We're only one of 8.
one of 8 that
And
does
probably
what
originally most of them had an auditor.
Yeah, and what we've done is we separated those duties. You know, as I described the audit, you know, in a business, and it typically would take place. You'd have the financial audit and the inventory to take place. Well, what happened was it got divided, and now you have the examiner of public accounts, as you know, who does the financial audit, and the state auditor. They become, in effect, inventory specialists. And they don't do anything really, the bottom line is, but go out and count personal property of the state of the value of over $500.
The auditor does now.
The auditor does that. They have a staff of 8, including the auditor, and they have a budget of almost $1 million. And it's important. Now, I'm not saying that what they do is not important, and they do a good job out there as they're doing that. But what they do is they go out with a scanner, like you go to the grocery store. There's a barcode that's been put on the state property. They scan that and do the inventory and come back to Montgomery, and they turn that over to the examiners of public accounts, and then the books. You know,
They do it every year.
Every 2, they do it biannually, every 2 years. And you know, as you know, the examiners of public accounts, they do a financial audit every 2 years.
Right.
And so you have the examiners of public accounts coming into that office, that state office or wherever that it may be, where state funds are being spent or expended, and they do their financial audit. And then following that, in comes a representative from the state auditor's office who comes in with their scanner gun and scans the barcodes and prepares the inventory of the property that
Do they
belongs to the state.
coordinate that now? There's different times.
No, sir. They don't coordinate that. Now, they do take that inventory and provide it to the examiner of public accounts, but they're not coordinating being there at the same time. The state auditor's office operates independently from the examiners of public accounts in that regard. And they go out and they count the inventory of the state. Now, if anything's missing, and what's interesting about this is the state auditor has no enforcement authority of its own.
Who they turn it over, they say?
If there is something missing, or there's been some misappropriation of property, then they can refer it, if it's criminal in nature, to the district attorney in that county or the attorney general's office. Now, it's my understanding that over the last, prior to probably in the last few years, that there's not been any prosecution by the attorney general's office for any property loss in the state. And in the last 13 years, that was referred by the state auditor. And so it's kind of interesting in that, you know, that seems like there should be some more accountability regarding that property. And just the reality of it is that, you know, the property, you know, given that we have about $1.8 billion worth of state property around this state that's being accounted for, you know, and lots of agencies, lots of different individuals are touching that property, and you would imagine that some of it comes up missing. And so what happens when it does come up missing, the auditor's office asks for an accounting of that, ask, you know, what's happened to it, and then if they can say, well, it's just been lost, then they prepare an affidavit and state that it's been lost. But there's no enforcement authority on the part of the state auditor to sit down and say, now, Mr. Flowers, you had a laptop computer that was here 2 years ago, and you don't have it. Where is that laptop? Well, I don't know.
Well, they need to find that out. Yeah.
And then I can, as the representative of the state auditor's office, all I can really do is get your superior get to sign an affidavit saying it's lost or missing of some nature. And then if I believe that it's been of some criminal nature, then I can ask the state auditor to refer it to the attorney general or to the district attorney. now what's very interesting about this is that if you go on the other side of this to the examiners of public accounts, those individuals in that office, they have subpoena power. And they hold hearings. And so the difference between, I'm an attorney, and so I'm fully aware of the power of that subpoena. And to be able to have the power of the subpoena, I could call, and we know in the past, people we can have the President of the United States in the right circumstance sit down under a subpoena and have to answer questions. And so it's a very, very effective tool in being able to reach into and find problems and remedy them. And so that is what the Examiner's Public Accounts has. And so they, on the one hand, if they go into a department and they've audited an agency and find money missing, and they believe that there's something more that needs to be done, they can subpoena you, Mr. Flowers. There's X amount of dollars that's missing in your accounts.
So they've got the kind of power.
Put you under oath and say, Ms. Flowers, I need you to tell us what happened to this, and then you're going to have to talk about that under oath. And whatever is said and done, and I can hold an administrative hearing. The evidence that's done inside that hearing is prima facie evidence to a grand jury of criminal conduct if that's what's taking place. But it's a very good tool to be able to hold accountable those individuals on that side of the books to make sure the money is properly accounted for. We don't have that on the inventory side of state property. I've heard a story of one state trooper who lost 3 guns. And nothing was done. And he just simply said, well, I put it on the top of my car and drove off, and they're not there. And I know that, and you would know, there's something wrong
with 3 of them,
with 3 of them gone like that. And so we need to have, and that's a small thing, but it's a big thing if you multiply it out across the state of Alabama and the number and the amount of property and the value of that property that we have. So my goal is this. We need to change this and remedy it. One is that I believe that what we can do is either strengthen the office, roll over the duties of the examiners of public accounts underneath the state auditor, give me as a state auditor the ability to use the subpoena, to have administrative hearings, to go after any waste, any fraud, any mismanagement of the state's property.
Because the budget would be worth $1 million budget if
yes,
we did
sir.
that.
Oh,
I imagine the Examiner of Public Accounts budget's over $1 million.
Their budget is about $7+ million.
That's what I was thinking.
And so it's much higher than what the.
I imagine the chief of it makes more than most people do.
Oh yeah.
Ron Jones.
Ron Jones has been. He's been there 20+ years, and apparently the legislature, you guys who've served on that committee, and I'm sure you probably were part of that committee.
It's been a while since I was on there, but he had been on there the entire time I was there.
He's been, and that term is every 7 years, and so he's been reappointed apparently, and there's been a good, from the legislature's standpoint, they feel that they've got the right person that's been there. But and at this point, here we are at a time in our state's history and a point in the time of the course of history in this country that we are absolutely financially strapped. There's no way to look at it but to look at it and say, if it was my money, how would I deal with it?
So we need to either strengthen the auditor's office and make it almost stop the duplication.
That's right.
Take the Examiner of Public Accounts, make one or the other omnipotent.
Exactly.
Like that. That's a good thing. I got to give you credit. You know more about the auditor's job and history than I've ever talked to about it. So you've done your homework running this job. If indeed you don't get that done, at what point in the 4-year term would you say we can't get it done, let's abolish it? You try the first 2 years to get that accomplished? And then
I've been talking to the legislators now, and the ones that are out there, Senator Dial, who's from over in Clay County, in that area from where I grew up, and he attempted to introduce a bill 10 years ago to abolish the auditor's office.
I remember it.
And it failed. But what I would say is this is my sense of it is if I don't have a sense that there's a desire on the part of the leadership of the legislature to strengthen the office and to restore to it what it was originally intended to have, the constitutional powers it was originally intended to have, to monitor the finances of the state, then my intention is to work with them to do the opposite then, and let's go ahead and let's get a constitutional amendment drafted, let's get it passed in the legislature, and let's eliminate the waste. If they're not going to give you the power, then stop wasting that $1 million that's being put into that office now, and roll the duties that the auditor has to conduct those inventories underneath the examiners of public accounts. Those are all professionals that are in that office, and everything I understand about them, they do an outstanding job across the country. They're recognized as doing good jobs here in this state.
Right now, let me ask you: you know the history of that job? That's really impressive. Have you ever done any prosecuting as a lawyer? You do most of the defense work? Or
no, as an attorney, I represent plaintiffs in cases, and I've done domestic relations work. I've done litigation in several different areas, and so in that sense, yes. And I have had a few occasions over the 25 years where in a municipal court, you come into court and the prosecutor has a conflict of interest, and the judge looks around and says, "Mr. Bryan, would you mind stepping in to prosecute a case?" And I've done that.
Right. Now let's go back, as you will, and tell viewers more about yourself. You actually were born in Clay County.
No, sir, I wasn't born in Clay County. I was born in Fernandina Beach, Florida.
Okay, but you grew up in Clay
County.
But I
grew up in Clay County. My daddy, and we had 5 children in my family.
Around Limeville, is that where you grew up?
In Ashland.
Ashland, uh-huh.
My daddy wanted to raise us on the farm.
Well, you and Bob Riley were friends. Y'all knew
now we bought eggs from him.
Uh-huh.
And his farm was just down the road there from High Pine Road, where our dairy farm was.
So you knew each other now?
Yes, sir. It sure did.
He sold eggs, didn't he?
He sold eggs. His family did, and our family had a dairy farm.
You born and raised on a dairy farm then? Raised on a dairy farm.
Milking
around
cows.
Ashland.
Around Ashland. And got up every morning at 4 o'clock and would go milk cows. And my dad didn't go to school. And Dad would get through at school, come home, get off the bus. At 30 minutes, got to watch Andy Taylor for just a minute.
He was on that afternoon?
Then it'd run out. Then I'd have to go out to the barn to get ready to milk. Now,
so you got up when you got home from school too, didn't you?
Yeah, it was morning and evening, and that was the way dairy farming was. My dad ended up being Alabama Dairyman of the Year back in 1968. He was very involved in the Alabama Farm Bureau, and Dad ended up serving on the board of directors here at the Alabama Farm Bureau back when Mr. Louder, I believe, was in charge.
I saw Tommy Louder, who's Mr. Ed Louder's son, the other day. I was reminding him how his daddy helped found the original Farm Bureau, and a lot of folks don't know the history of that. See, his daddy grew up on a farm in Washington County and became a county agent, and then helped build the old the Alpha business, the farm, especially the insurance company.
My goodness, what a humble beginning. But I remember how important what my dad was very involved in.
And Ed Louder was head of the farm.
He was head of it then. I remember him coming and seeing Dad and all.
Now, but then you went to Jacksonville undergraduate school and Cumberland Law School?
Jacksonville undergraduate, Cumberland Law School at Sanford University.
Graduated from Ashland High School?
Clay County High School. Did
you play football?
I sure did. You can't be in Clay County High School.
Well, you're a pretty big guy. What position you play?
I played right end and lefty, offensive, lefty, defensive end. I did all the kicking too.
Well, you about 6'4", weren't you?
6'2".
6'2"?
A little over 6'2". Kept trying to put on weight.
I couldn't gain weight either. You know, when I was in high school, I played end like you, and I was 6'4",